What if doing everything right still leads to losing everything? What if faith does not act as a shield, but instead becomes the very ground on which pain is tested? We grow up believing that life follows a predictable, comforting pattern. We are taught from a young age that effort leads to reward. That goodness attracts protection. That faith creates a safety net. Even when we do not say it out loud, we live our lives expecting a certain level of fairness. We operate as if the world is governed by a cosmic balance sheet where our virtues are weighed against our outcomes. We live as if the world is fair by default. But then something breaks. And suddenly, the rules we trusted no longer apply. The sky turns gray, the ground shifts beneath our feet, and the logic of our lives evaporates. This story begins with a man who believed deeply. Not loudly, not performatively for the sake of an audience, but sincerely in the quiet corners of his soul. His life was not perfect, for no human life is, but it was ordered. His days had a rhythm. His work had a clear meaning. His home was a sanctuary of peace. He was known for his integrity, a quality that is easy to claim but difficult to maintain. People trusted his word without needing a contract. His reputation was not built on the shifting sands of power or the hollow echoes of influence, but on the solid rock of consistency. He did what was right even when no one was watching. He chose the difficult path of honesty even when it cost him something precious. He was a man who lived with his eyes turned toward the eternal while his hands worked the soil of the temporal. His land prospered beyond measure. His animals multiplied in the fields, a living testament to his hard work and God's favor. His home was a vibrant place, full of movement, sound, and the chaotic beauty of a large family. Children laughed freely in the hallways. There was always enough food on the table to feed a stranger. There was security in the thought of tomorrow. But more important than what he owned was how he lived within those possessions. Each morning, before the sun had fully claimed the horizon, he rose with reverence. He prayed, not out of a frantic fear of punishment, but out of a deep, abiding humility. He prayed not only for himself, but for his family, specifically for his children, aware that faith cannot be inherited like a piece of land. It must be practiced. It must be chosen. He understood something rare in this world. He understood that devotion is not proven on the good days when the harvest is plenty and the body is strong. Devotion is formed in private, in the quiet repetition of choice, in the decision to honor God when there is nothing to gain and everything to lose. By all visible measures, his life looked blessed. It was the ideal. It was the dream we all chase. And that is precisely why what follows feels so unbearable, so jarring to our sense of reality. Beyond human sight, beyond the reach of human reasoning, something monumental was unfolding. In a realm we cannot touch, a question was being asked that reached deeper than prosperity, deeper than loss, deeper than life itself. A question about the nature of faith. Would devotion remain if the reward disappeared? Would trust survive if every blessing was stripped away until only the man remained? This was not a punishment for a hidden sin. It was not a divine act of revenge. It was not a display of cruelty. It was a test of depth. It was a cosmic investigation into whether a human being could love the Creator for who he is, rather than for what he gives. And so, without warning, without a single moment to prepare the heart, the collapse began. The first messenger arrived breathless, his voice shaking with the weight of the news he carried. Disaster had struck with the speed of lightning. Property destroyed. Livelihood stolen in a moment of violence. Lives lost in the blink of an eye. Before the shock could even settle into his bones, before grief could take a recognizable shape, another messenger arrived. And then another. It was a cascade of tragedy. Each message was heavier than the one before. Each word removed another layer of the life he had spent decades building. Fields burned to ash. Livestock, his wealth and his legacy, gone. Servants, people he had known and cared for, killed. And then came the final message. The one that makes the heart stop. The one that silences the room and makes the air feel too thin to breathe. The sound of life disappeared from his home. The laughter of his children, the very heartbeat of his existence, became a memory in a single afternoon. Hope collapsed inward. In a single day, the sun rose on a wealthy, happy, blessed man, and it set on a man who had absolutely nothing left but the clothes on his back and the dust at his feet. His body reacted before his mind could even process the magnitude of the horror. His strength left him. He fell to his knees. He tore his robe in the ancient gesture of brokenness. He wept. Not quietly. Not with the dignified control of a man trying to keep up appearances. This was grief without a filter. This was pain that had no language. And yet, through the broken breath and the trembling hands, through the salt of his tears and the dust of his mourning, he spoke. He spoke words that were not formed by logic, but by a radical, terrifying surrender. I came into this world with nothing, and I will leave with nothing. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In that moment, the test seemed answered. Faith remained. But the story was not finished. Suffering was not done with him yet. Soon, the tragedy moved from his circumstances to his very skin. His body itself became a battlefield. Pain spread like a fire. Sores opened from head to foot. His physical strength faded until he was a shadow of the man who once walked the fields. Sleep, the only escape for the suffering, abandoned him. He sat among the ashes of his life, isolated from a world that no longer recognized him. He took a piece of broken pottery to scrape at his wounds, not because it brought healing, but because the irritation was all he had left to manage. There was no medicine for this. There was no relief in sight. Most agonizing of all, there was no explanation. The pain was constant. It was relentless. It was profoundly humiliating. And yet, worse than the physical agony was the silence of the heavens. Those who once gathered around him, who sought his wisdom and enjoyed his table, now kept their distance. Suffering makes people uncomfortable. It acts as a mirror that people do not want to look into. When pain cannot be explained, when it happens to a good person, it threatens the security of everyone else. Even his wife, the one person who shared his history and his heart, reached her breaking point. She was overwhelmed by her own grief, by the exhaustion of watching the man she loved disintegrate. She spoke words that were not evil, but were profoundly human. Why continue this? Why hold on to your integrity? Why maintain faith if this is the result? Curse God and die. Her words were a cry for an end to the nightmare. But he refused. Not because he was unshaken, not because he was a stoic superhero, but because he understood something that changes everything. Faith is not a transaction. If God is worthy only when life is good, then our faith is nothing more than a business deal. If devotion exists only when it is rewarded with comfort, then it is not devotion at all, it is just self-interest in a religious mask. Then, his friends arrived. At first, they did the most beautiful and right thing friends can do. They said nothing. They saw that his grief was too large for words, so they sat with him in the dirt. They shared the silence. They mourned with him for 7 days and 7 nights without uttering a syllable. And for a brief moment, that silence was healing. It was a bridge of empathy. But silence is a heavy thing. It makes people uneasy. It forces them to face a world where bad things happen without an immediate answer. It forces them to confront the possibility that they, too, could lose everything despite their best efforts. And soon, the need for comfort for themselves outweighed their empathy for him. Words began to replace presence. They spoke confidently. They spoke logically. They spoke with the certainty of men who believe they have God figured out. Their argument was simple: this does not happen without a reason. God is just. Therefore, you must have done something wrong. You must have a secret sin. You must be hiding a darkness that we cannot see." Their words were sharp, even when they were wrapped in the language of ancient wisdom. Their theology was clean, neat, and safe. Because if suffering always equals guilt, then as long as they were good, they were protected. They weren't just trying to fix him, they were trying to protect their own sense of safety. They were trying to keep their own world from collapsing by proving that he deserved his. But reality is not that simple. And in the depths of his soul, he knew it. He knew his own heart. He knew his own integrity. So he spoke back. He did not speak with politeness or careful, religious language. He questioned. He protested. He poured out his confusion, his anger, and his utter despair. He asked why he was even born if this was the end. He asked why he had to continue living in a body that felt like a prison. He asked why he had to suffer without a clear cause. This was not rebellion in the way we often think of it. This was honesty. This was the raw, unvarnished cry of a soul that still believes God is there enough to argue with him. Faith does not require your silence. Faith allows for lament. Faith is not the absence of questions, it is the courage to ask them. Faith is not pretending everything is fine when your world is screaming that it isn't. Faith is bringing your pain, your screaming, and your brokenness to God even when your heart is breaking. And then came the longest stretch of all. The silence returned. But this time, it was the silence of God. No response came from the clouds. No reassurance was whispered in the night. No relief touched his skin. His prayers felt like echoes in a hollow cave. Heaven felt like brass. Hope felt like a cruel joke. This is the place where many people give up. This is the valley where most faith breaks. It's not usually when the loss arrives, it's when the silence lingers. It's when you have lost everything and the one you trusted most seems to have nothing to say. It is the feeling of being abandoned in the dark. It is when suffering continues without a hint of meaning. It is when faith feels completely one-sided. But faith is not proven when miracles happen quickly. Anyone can believe when the fire falls from heaven and the enemy is defeated. Faith is revealed when the fire does not fall. Faith is revealed when the darkness stays. Night after night, beneath an endless, indifferent sky, something began to shift within him. In his exhaustion, in his total emptying of self, he realized how small he was. Not insignificant, never insignificant, but limited. He realized that his perspective was like looking through a pinhole at a vast, moving tapestry. He realized that perhaps faith was never about controlling the outcomes of his life. Perhaps faith was never a tool to get what he wanted or a shield to prevent what he feared. Perhaps faith was about trusting the one who sees the entire tapestry, even when the thread currently being woven is black and jagged. Then, without warning, the silence ended. But it did not end gently. It did not end with a soft whisper of comfort or a list of reasons why his children had died and his wealth was gone. The air began to move. The earth beneath the ashes trembled. A force beyond human explanation, a presence that made the words of his friends look like child's play, made itself known. A voice spoke from the whirlwind. It did not speak to justify the suffering. It did not speak to apologize. It spoke to reveal authority. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Tell me, if you have understanding. Who marked off its dimensions? Who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? The questions were relentless. They covered the stars, the depths of the ocean, the instincts of the wild animals, and the cycles of the seasons. They were not designed to shame him, but to reframe his entire existence. Do you see the whole picture? Do you understand the complexities of a billion moving parts in the universe? The message was unmistakable and piercing. You may not understand the why, but you are not forgotten. You are small, but you are held by the one who is unimaginably large. He covered his face. Not in terror, though the moment was terrifying, but in a profound, soul-quieting humility. He realized that God does not owe us explanations. We are not the judges of the Almighty. And yet, the most incredible part of the whirlwind was not the power, it was the fact that God was speaking to him at all. In the midst of the silence, God had been listening. Faith matured in that moment. It was no longer the faith of a man who did right to get good. It was the faith of a man who had seen the face of the Creator and realized that the Creator was enough. Not because the pain had disappeared, his skin was still sore, his children were still gone, but because his trust had reached a level of maturity that the world could no longer touch. In time, healing did come. It did not come all at once. It came slowly, gently, like the turning of a season. Strength returned to his limbs. Life began to reform around him. He found the courage to build again, to love again, to hope again. Joy eventually followed. It was a different kind of joy than he had known before. It was quieter. It was deeper. It was wiser. It was a joy that knew the cost of its own existence. When he looked at his new life, he saw the traces of the old one, like scars that have faded but never truly vanish. He was no longer just a faithful man in the way the world defines it. He was a refined man. He was a man who had been through the fire and found that the only thing that burned away was his illusions. This story, which we often focus on for its tragedy, is not ultimately about pain. It is about endurance. It is about the terrifying, beautiful possibility of trusting God when life makes absolutely no sense. It is about the fact that we live in a world that is broken, where the innocent suffer and the wicked often prosper, and yet, there is a meaning that sits above the chaos. Today, suffering wears many different faces. It looks like the crushing weight of anxiety that won't let you leave the house. It looks like the cold, gray fog of depression that drains the color from your world. It looks like the sudden, sharp shock of financial loss or the long, slow ache of loneliness. It looks like the uncertainty of a future that seems to have no place for you. But across the thousands of years that separate us from the man in the ashes, the question remains unchanged. It is the only question that matters in the end. Will your faith survive without the answers you feel you deserve? Will you continue to trust when the silence is all you hear? Because faith is not trusting God when life makes sense. That's just observation. That's just agreeing with a favorable reality. True faith, the kind that can withstand the whirlwind, is trusting Him when life does not make sense. It is the choice to say, "Blessed be the name," when your heart is in pieces on the floor. It is the realization that we are part of a story much larger than our own comfort. We are part of a cosmic drama where our trust in the dark is one of the most powerful things in existence. Sometimes, God does not explain. He doesn't give us a map or a list of reasons. Instead, He does something much more profound. He reveals who He is. He reminds us that He is the beginning and the end, the architect of the stars and the keeper of our tears. And in that revelation, we find that we don't need the answers as much as we thought we did. We just need Him. We need the peace that passes understanding, the strength that is made perfect in weakness, and the hope that does not put us to shame. Even in the silence. Even in the ashes. Even when the whirlwind is the only thing we can see.